I'm Natalie Moore, 22 years old and the first in my family to graduate from college. After juggling classes and two jobs for 4 relentless years, my graduation day finally came. But instead of seeing my parents waving from the crowd, I got a last-minute text. Sorry, sweetie, the Martyr Super Bowl parties today. You know how much your dad loves it. I walked across that stage alone, diploma in hand, smiled for the camera, like everything was fine, and then cried in my car until my makeup melted. That moment, it broke me, and then it changed everything. Or I tell you how I rebuilt my life from that heartbreak. Drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. If your family ever let you down when you needed them most, hit subscribe and stay with me, because sometimes being left behind is exactly what pushes us forward. Was born and raised in a place where dreams rarely made it past the kitchen door. Toledo, Ohio. A town just big enough for everyone to know how many cars were in each neighbor's garage, but too small for someone like me to hide anything for long. The house I lived in with my parents was built during my grandparents' time. A single-story home with cream-colored walls now faded gray from kitchen smoke and the dust of time. Our front yard had more dirt than grass. The iron fence was rusted and the side gate always stuck, giving off a familiar clink each time I snuck out to the library. We weren't poor to the point of going hungry, but we never knew what comfortable felt like either. My father, Daryl Moore, had worked as an assembly line worker at the General Motors plant for over 15 years before it shut down. Since then, he drifted between private garages, taking whatever job paid that day, never caring about insurance or the future. He lived by the motto, get through today, deal with tomorrow later. My mother, Cheryl, worked part-time at a nail salon. The rest of her hours were mostly spent glued to her phone, live streaming her cooking on Facebook or gossiping in longtime group chats with her best friends. In our house, 3 things were treated like religion: cold beer, football, and tradition. They didn't read books, didn't watch the news unless it was sports coverage, and never attended a parent-teacher conference unless it was a last-minute emergency. When I brought home a certificate from school, honor roll, first place in a writing contest, perfect math scores, my mother would glance at it, nod, and continue flipping channels to find. My dad would mumble something like, "Good, but did you clean the house yet?" I learned early on that I didn't belong. I didn't like sports. I wasn't good at small talk and had no interest in those weekend family gatherings that revolved around who just replaced their roof or who's now in debt over a new car. Instead, I loved books, anything with words, with knowledge. I devoured economics texts, read novels in the bathroom to avoid being teased. I studied the 2008 financial crisis when I was only 13. I immersed myself in terms like risk analysis, sustainable investing, and behavioral finance, things no one around me had ever heard of. They called me a bookworm, a weirdo. Once my dad even said to his friends right in front of me, "It's like this kid was born into the wrong house." Someone laughed. I laughed too. But inside, it felt like a knife to the gut. I can remember the last time my parents asked, "Are you okay?" Or even something as simple as, "What's on your mind?" Family meals were always drowned in the sound of the TV. Every time I tried to talk about something that happened at school, my mom would cut me off with a line like, "Tell me later. This part's good." And later came. I learned how to be silent. I learned how to rely on myself. But I also learned how to dream. Dream of a world beyond Toledo. A place where I didn't have to apologize for being different. Where I didn't have to force myself to fit into a mold that was never meant for me. I dreamed of the day someone would say, "Natalie, we need voices like yours." Or even something as simple as, "We see you." And the older I got, the clearer it became. If I ever wanted to break free from that invisible cage, I'd have to pick the lock myself. No one was coming to rescue me. No one was going to hand me an opportunity. I had to claim it. But I also knew to make that happen, I had to hide a lot, including the truth that I had applied to 10 different universities without telling a single soul in my family. I remember exactly the night I sent in my first application. It was a Friday evening. The whole house was buzzing with fried chicken takeout and the Michigan-Ohio State game. My dad had placed a $50 bet on the home team while my mom was flipping chocolate chip cookies in the oven. I was in my room, door locked, using the old laptop I'd worked all summer to buy back from a pawn shop. My hands trembled as I clicked submit, my first application, to the University of Michigan, a school I'd never even dared to say out loud that I dreamed of. I sent out 10 applications in total, all done in secret late at night when the house was asleep under the dim glow of my desk lamp with the TV buzzing faintly from the living room. I used fee waiver codes from my school counselor, hunted down every small scholarship and grant I could find. I knew one thing for sure. Without financial aid, I'd never leave Toledo. I hid the response letters under my mattress. When the acceptance letter from the University of Michigan arrived, with a partial merit scholarship, I held it in my hands for almost an hour, unable to believe it was real. Every bit of effort I had poured in had paid off. I imagined sharing the moment with my family. I pictured my mom hugging me, my dad saying something like, "That's my smart girl." But deep down, I knew the reality wouldn't look anything like the dream. And I was right. That evening, while the family sat eating lukewarm spaghetti, my mom had forgotten to turn off the oven. I opened the envelope, placed it on the table, and said I got into college, Michigan. They offered me a partial scholarship. I can go. My mom looked up from her phone, raising an eyebrow as if I just said something absurd. Michigan? As in Ann Arbor? You seriously plan on leaving home? My dad chuckled, chewing his spaghetti before waving his hand dismissively. That? School's full of rich kids. What? You think you're some genius now? Finish your degree and you'll still end up unemployed back here like the rest of those kids from up the block. Then he turned to my mom, grinning. Told you. Girl reads too much. Done fried her brain. I sat there still clutching the letter that just moments ago had felt like a treasure. I'm not leaving home. I just want a chance. I'll get a job. I'll manage on my own. My mother sighed, slicing into her garlic bread as she muttered. And who's going to clean the house? Who's going to help me with groceries? You don't just get to walk out on responsibilities whenever you feel like it. No one said congratulations. There were no hugs, no proud smiles. I cleared the dishes like I did every night, then went back to my room, closed the door, and sat on the floor. My emotions swirled like a storm. Part joy, part sorrow, part anger, part exhaustion. But more than anything, I felt disappointment. I quietly started preparing. Picked up a job at a pizza shop to save what little I could. Scavenged used textbooks from the library and packed the essentials into cardboard boxes I grabbed from the local grocery store. The morning I left, the sky was gray from the previous night's rain. My dad was still asleep as I rolled my suitcase to the door. My mom was deep in a Facebook debate about how to make cornbread without baking powder. I said, I'm leaving now. But no one looked up, just a voice from behind. Don't go wasting money on nonsense. I closed the door behind me, dragging my suitcase down the gravel road I'd walked 1,000 times as a kid. Each step felt heavier than the last. No one saw me off. No one hugged me. No one said, "We're proud of you." But I kept walking. I didn't know what waited for me in Ann Arbor. But I knew one thing. For sure. I couldn't go back. Not if I still wanted to become who I was meant to be. I arrived in Ann Arbor on an August morning with the early mist still clinging to the red-tiled roofs and the trees whispering overhead. The bus station was nearly a mile from the dorms. So, I dragged my cheap suitcase along the uneven sidewalks, weighed down not just by my belongings, but by a loneliness that was beginning to seep into my joints, into every step I took. The dorm I was assigned to had 3 floors. My room was a small corner on the 2nd floor. Just a single bed, a desk, and an old wooden dresser. I shared the room with Priya, a 3rd-year law student from New Jersey. Indian American, sharp, organized, and so direct it intimidated me at first. But Priya was also the first person to ask me a question that on the surface seemed simple. Coming all the way out here, did your parents drop? I didn't know what to say, so I just forced a smile and nodded. I wasn't ready for anyone to know the truth. That I'd boarded a Greyhound bus like someone fleeing a place that had never truly welcomed her. During my very first week, I landed a job at a little sandwich shop called Gracie's Subs, 6 blocks from campus. My schedule quickly filled. Full-time classes in the morning, work from 2 to 8, then studying late into the night. It became a cycle. Class, work, study, repeat. My meals were stale sandwiches from the shop or 59-cent ramen from the dollar store. After just a few weeks, I started losing sleep from sheer exhaustion. One day, I fell asleep during a macroeconomics discussion. My head slumped over my textbook like I was trying to absorb knowledge by osmosis. My professor, Dr. Lang, noticed. He asked to speak with me after class. I thought he was going to scold me, but instead he asked, "How many jobs are you working?" When I answered truthfully, he didn't judge. He just nodded thoughtfully and said, "I have a research assistant slot open. It's mostly data entry. Doesn't pay much, but the hours are flexible. Want to give it a try?" I said yes, without hesitation. That job allowed me to cut back my hours at the sandwich shop and sit in an air-conditioned office at least some afternoons. It was also in Dr. Lang's class that I met Jared, a pre-med student with permanent dark circles from MCT prep, and Mel, a STEM major, a black girl with braided hair and a mind as sharp as a scalpel. The three of us started studying together at the library on weekends. Slowly, they became the first people I could truly open up to. One night, while Jared and I were working on an assignment at 1A, he joked, "Natalie, when was the last time you actually rested?" I shrugged. "Middle school, maybe." Mel chimed in, pretending to be serious. "We should start a club. The people who don't understand the concept of relaxation." And just like that, the name the Survival Trio was born. They weren't just classmates. They were the only space where I truly felt heard. They understood the anxiety of counting every dollar on the electricity bill. They knew what it meant to measure each meal and skip parties, not out of pride, but because we couldn't afford to chip in for food. My family, they never called to ask if I was making it. Never asked what I was studying, how my friends were, if I was tired. Every time my phone rang, I knew it would be one of 3 things. Mom asking me to check the electric bill because the company's a scam. Dad asking me to look up water heater repair prices, or worse, "Do you have any money left over? I need to buy a few things." Over time, I learned to exhale quietly after each call, then get right back to my homework as if nothing had happened. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I knew that if I let myself truly feel it, I'd fall apart. Each semester passed, and I maintained a GPA above 3.9. I still don't know how I managed it, but I just did. I threw myself into books, into work, into anything that could help me forget I was living a life that felt like a shadow. And then 4 years went by, faster than I ever expected. My final spring arrived bathed in soft golden sunlight and a race against time to finish my senior thesis. I was nominated for a prestigious internship at a sustainable investment firm in Austin. And my friend soared too. Jared was accepted into medical school, and Mel got an offer from a nanomaterials research program. We, the Survival Trio, had climbed through every layer of dust, every hidden crack, every invisible barrier. We stood strong at the summit of our own making, ready to step across that final threshold, graduation. And me, I believed with all my heart that this time my parents would come. They had to. How could they miss the day their daughter became the first college graduate in the family? I had started planning for that day 3 months earlier. I mailed an official invitation to the house complete with a campus map, parking instructions, a list of nearby restaurants, and a handwritten note. "I already booked the hotel room, so you don't need to worry about anything." I even called my mom directly to confirm they got everything. She picked up, her voice unusually excited. "We got it. Don't worry, sweetheart. There's no way we'd miss your graduation, right? Hearing those words, I felt tears welling up. I had waited 14 years to hear them. I booked a hotel near campus. Almost $400 for 2 nights. That was 3 weeks worth of work at Gracie's. Every shift, every tip scraped together. But I didn't mind. I called it an investment in a memory worth making. I also reserved a table at Via Rosi, an Italian restaurant, just classy enough to mark the occasion, but not overly extravagant. I even pre-selected the menu, the vegetable lasagna I remembered my mom liking, and the red wine braised beef my dad once called a dish you remember for life. Every week I called home to count down. 6 weeks left, Mom and Dad. Yep, I'm counting the days. Only 3 more weeks. Yeah, your dad's out. Looking for a nice shirt to wear. I held on to those replies like a lifeline. Each word a knot in the rope of hope I'd clung to my entire life. But like everything else in my story, that rope began to fray. 3 weeks before graduation, when I brought up parking passes on campus, my mom changed the subject, saying, "I'm cutting fruit." Honey, you're talking too fast. 2 weeks out, I texted her a photo of my graduation dress. She replied with a pretty machine. But that same weekend, the Martas are throwing the biggest Super Bowl party ever. They're even hiring an outside chef. I froze. The Martas. Super Bowl. 2 words I'd heard over and over growing up. Our famously extravagant neighbors who hosted massive parties every year. But this time the Super Bowl weekend fell on the same weekend as my graduation. I thought you said you were definitely coming. I texted. It wasn't until the next day that I got a reply. Your dad's shoulder is acting up. He can't drive that far. You know I'm not good with highways. And Linda asked me to make cheesecake. She's counting on me, stared at the screen. My hand clenched so tightly it turned pale. The graduation ceremony was scheduled for 10 a.m. on Sunday. The Super Bowl didn't start until 6 p.m. The drive from Toledo to Ann Arbor was just over an hour. They absolutely could make it. They just didn't want to. I texted, "Mom, this is the day I've spent for years working toward. It's also the first time someone in our family will graduate from college. It's a big deal." She replied 5 minutes later with just one sentence. "Don't make such a fuss, honey. There will be plenty of other occasions." I bit my lip hard and went silent. I didn't send anything else. I went to pick up my graduation gown and cap from the student office. When the staff member handed me the pressed black robe and the cap with a shimmering purple tassel, I turned away quickly, afraid she'd see my eyes already turning red. Bill held their seats at the ceremony. Second row, left side of the stage, 3 empty chairs. The night before graduation, I prepared everything carefully. My dress ironed, shoes polished, honor cords draped around my neck, and my name listed in the commencement program. Natalie Moore, GPA 3.93, Pi Beta Kappa. At nearly midnight, I left my parents a voicemail. Tomorrow's graduation. The ceremony starts at 10 o'clock. I've saved your seats. If Dad's tired, Mom can drive. Even if you're late, I still hope to see you. I'll be waiting. The next morning, I woke up at 6 o'clock, got dressed in silence, pulled my hair back into a neat bun, dabbed some blush so I wouldn't look too pale. I left the dorm early, walking through a morning fog so thin and gray it felt like a sorrowful veil settling over my chest. Campus was packed. Everyone had someone. Some kids brought grandmas in wheelchairs. Little siblings ran through the grass wearing t-shirts printed with their graduate's face. I don't remember how I ended the call. I just remember sitting on my bed afterward, motionless for nearly an hour, phone face down on the pillow, eyes locked on the tiny crack in the ceiling. That one sentence kept echoing in my head. Your mom said you got some graduation money. Not a single congratulations, you did it. Not a we're proud of you. No questions about how I felt. Not even a hint of regret for not showing up. Just a request. Once again, they needed something from me. I felt like an emotional 8th. 22 years of being approached only when they needed to withdraw something. Money, energy, patience, even the last ounce of tolerance I had left. And the worst part was that I had let it happen for far too long. That night, I didn't sleep. I quietly opened the graduation photos Lily had sent me. Pictures of me standing with my friends, still smiling, despite my red, puffy eyes. Photos of me receiving my diploma. Sunlight catching the folds of my gown, creating a glow that looked radiant but felt utterly hollow. I opened my laptop and logged into the employee portal of Greencap Investment Group, the company I had accepted an offer from 3 weeks earlier. A financial analyst role in their sustainable investment division based in Austin, Texas. I typed a short email to the hiring manager. Due to unexpected personal circumstances, I'd like to ask if it's possible to begin earlier than my original start date. I'm ready to relocate to Austin anytime. The next morning, I got a reply almost immediately. We fully support the change. The company will provide 2 weeks of temporary housing. Please let us know your flight details so we can arrange your welcome. I read that line over and over like it was a lifeline. A new city, a place without words that cut deep. A space where I could begin again. This time carrying no one's expectations but my own. I packed my things. Not much. A few changes of clothes, my laptop, textbooks, and a single framed photo of me with Jared. Laughter, names being called, the click of cameras. It all rose like waves crashing around me. Walked to the student check-in area. In the pocket of my gown, I kept my phone just in case my parents arrived late. At 9:52 a.m., the screen lit up. My heart clenched, but it wasn't a message. It was a Facebook notification. Cheryl Moore had just posted 3 new photos. I tapped to open. The first picture was a food table overflowing with cheesecake, snacks, and chilled beer. The second showed my mother with Linda, both grinning in matching team jerseys. The third was a group selfie in front of a giant TV screen captioned, Super Bowl Sunday greater than any other celebration. I checked the time. 9:56 a.m. I stood frozen. My hands trembled so much I had to raise one to steady the collar of my gown. Then a voice rang out. Natalie Moore swallowed the lump in my throat, took a deep breath, walked out into the center of the field, surrounded by hundreds of clapping hands. Not for me. I bowed to receive my diploma, smiled for the camera, and just as I turned to walk off stage, I looked over to the second row. On the left, 3 empty seats never used. After the ceremony, while everyone gathered for photos with their families, I slipped past them quietly, avoiding cameras, avoiding the pity in people's eyes. I walked straight back to the dorm, still wearing my gown. And when the door closed behind me, I finally allowed myself to collapse, head in hands, and cried, not because they didn't show up, but because I had truly believed this time would be different. 2 days later, my phone rang again. It was my dad. I answered, my voice still raw. Hello. His voice came through, light as ever. Hey, Natalie. I need a favor. The roof's leaking. Looks like the back half shot. The repair guy says it'll cost around $3,200. Your mom said you got some graduation money, and in that moment, I realized to them the degree I held mattered less than a roof. Repair invoice. A version that had spent too long chasing validation from people who were never going to give it. I wasn't angry at them anymore. I had simply let go. Austin greeted me with blistering heat and a strange new air. Freedom. The temporary apartment Greencap had arranged was on the 12th floor of a modern building in South Congress with a view that stretched out to the city skyline like a promise. It was small but clean with a tidy kitchen and floor-to-ceiling windows that let sunlight pour in every morning. I had never lived anywhere like it, where nothing reminded me of duty and everything whispered instead. This is where you begin again. The first week at the company passed like a dream. Kind coworkers, a manager who genuinely cared, and no one pried into my personal life unless I chose to share. I had lunch with a few fellow new hires, walked home past scattered cafes, and Bought the first bouquet of flowers I'd ever bought for myself, placing them in a glass jar on my desk. A simple act, but one that made me feel like I had control over something, however small, else I hadn't called home. I hadn't texted. I wanted to give myself space to be someone new, untethered from the roles of the good daughter or the family support bank. I needed to see what life felt like without my mother's criticism, without my father's skeptical gaze. 2. See if breathing could come easier without them, and it was easier to breathe. Until one Saturday morning, my phone started buzzing nonstop, one missed call after another. After 7 months of complete silence, the name Mom lit up on the screen like nothing had ever happened. My chest tightened out of instinct. But this time, I didn't tremble. I didn't answer. The text came a few minutes later, short and casual. Dad and I are thinking of visiting Austin. Found cheap tickets for next weekend. Are you free? I stared at those words like they were a slow-moving wave inching its way back to shore. Not a single check-in for half a year, and suddenly, they wanted to drop by. I wasn't sure what the real reason was, but I knew my parents. They didn't go anywhere just to visit unless there was a specific agenda. Hours later, I replied carefully neutral in tone. If you come, you should stay at a hotel near downtown. My apartment's too small to host guests. My mom read the message immediately, but didn't reply until that evening. And when she did, it came with a list of hotel options and a follow-up. Is this one close to your place? Pricey. Are you sure we can't stay with you? I held the boundary I had worked so hard to build. I'm sure I need my own space. To work, expected anger. At least some passive-aggressive guilt-tripping. But no, the next message came back unusually sweet. All right, then I'll book the hotel for 2 nights. Make sure you find time to see us, okay? In the end, I agreed to meet. Partly out of curiosity, partly because I felt strong enough to face them. They arrived on a Friday afternoon. My mom stepped out of the taxi holding a bag of homemade cookies and wearing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. My dad looked noticeably older, more gray, a fuller gut still. Wearing that same tired plaid shirt, his shoulders a little more stooped. I hugged them just enough to be polite. They hugged back, but I could feel the mismatch between us. I was an updated version of myself, and they were still the people who never understood why I had changed. That first evening, I took them to a Tex-Mex spot near downtown. My mom smiled awkwardly through most of the meal. My dad stared at the menu like he couldn't believe a taco costs almost $10. They asked a few polite questions about work. I gave them a summary. Finance firm ESG investments, data analysis, risk evaluations for renewable energy projects. Mom nodded, but her eyes were still on her plate. Dad took a sip of beer, then suddenly set the glass down and said, "Actually, we came to Austin because there's something we need to talk to you about." I set my fork down, heart sinking with instinctive dread. I knew that line. I had heard it my entire life. It continued. My old buddy Doug, he's starting a small real estate company. Kind of a startup, you know. Needs some early investors to get in on the ground floor. They're eyeing a suburb outside Dallas. If he can get about $5,000 up front, he says you can buy in as a shareholder. I figure with your finance background, you'd see the value in something like this. My mother chimed in, her voice sweet like artificial honey. Of course, we're not pressuring you. We just really thought this could be a great opportunity for you to help the family a little. I looked at them. The pair who had never once put me ahead of a football game, a meal, or a neighborhood party. The pair who let me walk across that stage alone and then called afterward only to ask if I had money. And now, after flying thousands of miles, their reason for finally seeing me was to ask me to invest in my dad's friend's business. I placed both hands on the table, clenched them tightly to stay calm. Then I looked straight into their eyes for the first time without flinching, and I asked quietly but clearly, "Did you come here for me or for the money?" Silence. The air around the table turned cold, solid. My mother let out a tight smile, leaning forward, her voice gentle, but something underneath that softness felt rehearsed. "Sweetheart, why would you say that?" We're your parents. We came to see you. It's been so long. The investment thing just happened to come up, that's all. I didn't reply. I just looked silent, holding their gaze like I was daring them to see everything they had always avoided. My father crossed his arms, leaning back slightly, his lips tightening before finally snapping. That kind of talk is disrespectful. I flew all the way out here and now you're acting like we're freeloaders. I took a deep breath, heart heavy, but this time, I didn't look away. No, Dad. I'm just trying to separate love from obligation. Every time we needed family, we were an option. But whenever you needed something from us, we became a duty. My mother set her napkin down with a dry laugh. You're blowing this way out of proportion. It's a small thing. You talk like we're villains or something. I shook my head gently. I couldn't cry anymore. The pain had crystallized into something clearer, like a scar that no longer stings, but cools when touched by the wind. Do you realize that in all? For years of college, I never once heard you say, "Congratulations." My graduation, the most important day of my life, I stood under that burning sun waiting for you. 3 empty seats. While you were posting pictures of tacos and beer at the Martas, and you don't think anything about that is wrong. My final words came out in a near whisper, thick with emotion. My dad snapped, his voice hard and sharp. You're still a kid, talking like you've got all the answers. I sweated to raise you and now you're lecturing me. Family's supposed to support each other. I thought you understood that. I looked at him and for the first time saw it clearly. He didn't think he was wrong. He only saw my resistance. And to him, that meant I was ungrateful. My mother turned to me, her eyes beginning to glisten. She always used tears as a kind of passive weapon. Sweetheart, I know we've made mistakes. But you're so cold. Do you think it didn't hurt us when you left and never called? My reply came in a voice so calm it startled even me. I didn't leave. I walked away from a relationship that only ever flowed one way, and that's the only thing that kept me alive. Stood up, picked up my wallet, left my card on the table. I'll pay for this dinner. Like I've paid for everything else, including trust. My father called after me, voice rising with frustration. If you walk away now, don't expect us to open our hearts again. I turned back one last time. You don't need to open your hearts. You just need to learn how to look back. As for me, I've already learned enough. I walked out of the restaurant. Austin had just seen a light rain. With every step, it felt like I was shedding a weight I had carried on my back for years. I walked home, raindrops speckling my jacket, my heart in knots, but lighter than it had ever been. The message came close to midnight. Can you drive us to the airport tomorrow morning? Taxis are expensive here. I didn't respond right away. I brewed a cup of hot tea, sat by the window, watched the city lights shimmer like veins of life I never thought I'd be allowed to touch. Then slowly, I picked up my phone and typed from the hotel. Walk 3 blocks to the metro rail station. The red line goes straight to the airport. $3.25 per person. Safe travels. I set the phone down, turned off notifications, and returned to the warmth of my own space. No more waiting. I knew I had done the right thing. I had chosen myself. And this time, I didn't look back. 1 year later, on this very day, I stood on the trail circling Lady Bird Lake in Austin. My sneakers dusted, the early morning breeze brushing gently through my hair. The sun had just risen, casting a soft, golden glow over the water. No one was beside me, and I didn't need anyone to be. I came here alone, but I was no longer the girl in the black gown who graduated in silence. I was Natalie Moore, senior financial analyst in the Sustainable Investment Division at Green Cap Investment Group. I had my own small apartment in East Austin with bookshelves I built myself, photo frames filled with laughter, and a cat basket by the sun-drenched window. I had a life no one handed to me. I built it brick by brick, breath by breath. After that final confrontation with my parents, things didn't go completely silent, but quiet enough that I felt safe in the distance I had chosen. My mother still sent messages now and then, mostly about The neighbors, the weather, or gossip from Toledo. I responded politely, briefly, never letting those words find their way into my heart again. Drew clear financial boundaries, no transfers, no joint investments, no emergency rescues. I sent birthday cards with modest gift cards. I was no longer their backup bank. I was an adult with the right to say no. Last week, I was invited to join the advisory board for first suggesting college students at the University of Michigan, a program supporting those without a family history of higher education. I said yes immediately. And this morning, I'm meeting a girl named Alina, a junior from El Paso, unsure whether to pursue a degree in economics. She messaged me that her parents want her to be more practical and choose something less risky. I smiled sadly reading those words because in that short sentence I saw a reflection of my younger self, and for the first time, I realized I no longer felt stuck in my past. I live in the present, a present I chose. I still go to work every day, still dive into reports, but now I also carve out time for myself. Saturday afternoons at the farmer's market, Wednesday night board games with my new circle of friends, and I no longer feel guilty for enjoying something simply because I want to. I've learned you don't need permission to be happy. On the coffee table in my living room, I keep a small photo frame. It holds a picture of me in my graduation gown standing between Lily, Jared, Mel, and Priya. Not one of them shares my blood, but every single one of them is family chosen, not assigned. The kind that never walked away, never demanded, never turned love into a transaction. I used to believe walking alone meant I'd failed, that if no one was there to clap, the victory didn't matter. But now, I know walking alone isn't failure. It's the beginning of freedom. I unlocked my phone for the first time in a year and posted that graduation photo publicly. No tags, no mentions, just a short caption. A year later. I understand. Walking alone isn't failure. It's the first step toward freedom. I left it there. No need for validation. No need for permission. Just the truth as it stands. If you've ever found yourself standing at the edge between what your family expects and what your heart longs for, I hope you know this. You have a right to choose. You have a right to walk away, even if you have to walk alone. Not because you're selfish, but because you deserve a life that doesn't ask you to shrink in order to fit someone else's idea of who you should be. Leave a comment if this story speaks to you. And if you're somewhere on that hard road, I want you to know you are not alone. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. Even if the people you're walking away from are the very ones who were supposed to love you most.